Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Osceola Seminole Sidelines. My name is Pat Burnham, and I am joined by Osceola publisher Jerry Cutts and Osceola managing editor Bob Ferrante. And guys, FSU is back on the practice field this morning for practice number 7, and second day of full pads. And listen, it was a day that was dominated by the defense. If you watched First Impressions earlier, which is our taped video cast, our podcast right after practice, you have it was made very clear that the defense dominated the day. Guys, you don't want to, as we tell ourselves, like I try to be even kill about practice because there's going to be an ebb and flow to it, offense versus defense, good days for an individual player versus bad days for an individual player. It's just the grind of two-a-days or camp because we don't have two-a-days anymore. But listen, I try to be very cautious in how I say this, but I can't recall the defense having the kind of day it had today over the last 2.5 seasons anyway, based on these last 3 teams that Florida State has put out. But just get y'all's general thoughts on practice, and then we'll dive into some stars of practice.
Yeah, I thought Mike Norvell used the right term when he said sloppy, because from the offensive standpoint, definitely sloppy when you have that many drops and you can't get into a rhythm. But on the flip side, I thought the defense had so many pass breakups. It was just an impressive defensive performance too, really, that so many guys at all 3 levels, I think, linebackers, DBs, we talked on First Impressions about Cam Riley, that interception that he had, jumping the little dump off and returning it down the field. It was a really nice day just to see that many defensive players get the ball in the hands. I think sacks are maybe overrated, guys, and I think maybe pass breakups are underrated. So just to see that many deflections was really good for the defense.
Yeah, then of course, they did get to the quarterback a little bit. We did see that with pressures, not necessarily sacks, and it was a rougher day for the quarterbacks than I can remember, at least this camp. I thought, I didn't get a chance to see 7-on-7, but the defense really did dominate the team periods. I thought starting with the outdoor period around, I think it was period 16, I wrote it down, but team outside 16 and 17, I thought the defense did well there. Listen, inside drill now, just not old school inside drill where you take people to the ground, and I think that plays a part into it. But the defense was absolutely dominating. I had tackles at or near the line of scrimmage. I believe I charted, looks like 15 plays. I had 12 of the 15 within 2 yards of the line of scrimmage on either side. So it was a big day. Blake Nicholson, we've had a lot of people ask about Blake. And listen, the linebackers 7 days into camp certainly do look like they're starting to come along. We'd seen flashes from both Cam Riley and Sean Murphy. The previous 2 practices, I really felt like this was Blake's strongest day so far this camp. He had 3 of the 4 tackles starting off inside drill. Listen, it's always good when you start to see those linebackers show up in inside drill. It means those defensive tackles and defensive ends are keeping the linemen from getting to the second level. So it means many good things for Florida State on defense, that the defensive line is doing their job, and inside the linebackers are cleaning it up. But I really thought that Blake had a particularly strong day. And then, Bob, as you mentioned, we've seen Cam Riley and Sean Murphy continue to flash. I got Murphy's name written down a couple times. I had him down with the tackle for loss during inside. Obviously, we saw Cam make some plays in team. Jerry, you're our resident linebacker guru. Or at least lover of linebackers.
Yes.
however you want us to put it.
I'll claim the second, not the first.
Put it on the t-shirt, boys. Put it on the t-shirt.
That's right. Lover of linebackers.
I love the linebackers.
That's right. So just give us a little bit of your take. I know you do watch them rather intently. I know that's the position that you played when you played in high school. And obviously you were close with both Gene McDowell, a linebacker coach at Florida State, as well as my father, Wally Burnham, and watch a lot of film with both of them. What do you see out of that group right now?
Oh, they're definitely improving. I mean, there's a lot of them, first of all. And I think we're seeing some marked improvement. I think the fans will notice it when they come to the stadium. Hey, I wanted to go back to the first thing when you're talking about the practice. And as a guy who loves defense, I like seeing the ball hit the ground, but as you know, as a fan, it really bothers you. You know, you want to see completions and the chains being moved, but that doesn't bode well for the future if you're doing that at practice. And we have a head coach who's offensive minded. And so I think it bothers him. You know, when he comes off the practice field, I noticed some of the assistants who work around the football program were joking with me about don't ask him any tough questions because we got to live with him the rest of the day. You know?
Yeah, I talked to somebody that said we're going to go high.
Yeah. So, you know, Mike is an offensive oriented guy. So his mood is going to reflect the performance of the offense. And at any rate, though, I just think that the defense is usually ahead of the offense early in the fall.
Yep.
And heck, let's be honest, it's an easier position to play, really.
Well, yeah, and to pile onto your point there, Jerry, we don't know where the offense is in installation. There's more to install in installation and preseason camp on offense than there's on defense, and it could be that they're putting in new wrinkles to the offense, new plays. You got a group of players. You know, we've talked about it before. You've lost and I'm not making excuses for them, which is the reality of it, right? You lost a bunch of starters from last year's team off this offensive line, particularly the wide receiver positions, the quarterback. And listen, these were all elite players in college football. You're not just replacing a veteran; you're replacing guys that were elite players in college football on the offensive side of the ball, and that's going to take some time. And installation is a little bit more difficult on offense than it is on defense. There's more things to do on offense. There's more checks and balances on offense than there are defenses. And listen, you know, but to your point, going back to the turnovers, this is a staff that harps on ball security. We have seen it since Mike first got here. We have probably seen more guys get the ball punched out after they've caught it than I can remember. Again, you don't remember every practice, but Bob, are you seeing the same thing with the ball security and drops?
Yeah, I think from Adam Fuller's side, he's preached that mission takeaway since the start. But I think the culture is maybe more ingrained these last couple of years. Clearly, it's an emphasis even on a longer run. You might see the offensive player, whether it's a running back or a receiver, going down the sideline. There are still linebackers or DBs trying to punch the ball out, and often they do. I think Blake Nicholson had one either today or it was another day. I can't remember because they're kind of running together. But yes, the energy there, the message has been received. Yes.
You know, I want to comment on that because I've noticed this a little bit last year, but particularly this fall, I see a lot more time being spent on that technique on the defensive side of the ball. You know, a lot of times you guys are outside watching the offense. Pat and I are inside, and the defense spends a great deal of time on trying to punch the ball out, whether it's wide receivers, defensive backs against a wide receiver, a linebacker against a running back, a safety. At all levels, they're teaching strip the ball. And I don't remember, Pat, 10 years ago seeing that.
Yeah, I don't remember. You know, you usually have a turnover station, right? Now they do a turnover circuit where they're working on stripping the ball out of the quarterback's hands when he is back to pass. They even go to the extent of where a guy picks up a fumble, drops it, and the next guy is behind him trailing, picks it up. Or they go to the extent that the ball is fumbled, it's about to go out of bounds, and there's a guy assigned to punch the ball back in bounds so it can be recovered by the defense. So, and it's just like we've seen with ball security. Listen, we've seen them in the past have the offensive line go through a fumble recovery drill, right? Because the ball is going to be in the ground, and they want the offense to know how to recover it if a running back fumbles. So it is something that is a little bit surprising, but it is early in camp. I'll have a feeling that we will see a much different mindset with the offense tomorrow. I think that Mike is going to have a lot to teach off of today, and I think it might be a rough day in the meeting room for the old boys. If I had been a player, I don't know that I would have been looking forward to the after lunch portion of the day today, because listen, it was, and listen, I don't want to make any more of it than it is, because we did see, and this is Briley's got a question, so yeah, so we got him worried about the offensive line. That this O-line is just much better than last year. The question mark. So we're giving him some reasons to doubt the offensive line. Now, Briley, they had a tough day in team today. There's no other way around it. They had a tough day in inside, the way they practice inside, and I do think that has a factor in it, because it's not full speed to the ground, and I do think that impacts mentality of everybody in that drill. But it's the way they practice today. It's not the same as they used to do 25 and 30 years ago, where the safety was coming up and he was taking out the lead blocker if it was a pull. They don't do that. But I will say this, Briley, now there were some position-specific drills, pass pro, one-on-one pass pro, and then stunts and twist period. It was almost an even split. I had the defense winning one more rep in pass pro, one-on-one pass pro than the offense, and I had the offense winning one more rep in twist and stunt pickup than the defense won. So there are some good things to take away. And it's not all gray clouds and bad news. I mean, listen, and these things are going to happen. This is the one thing I know from having played and been a part of staffs before. These things do happen. Not every day is going to be great. That's why I caution. We are just telling you what we saw today. This will all come together on August 24th in Dublin, Ireland, and we'll see what we got. And listen, I'm talking to a couple of former players about the team, and they're like, yeah, I like what I see, and I don't like this and I like that, but you know what, we're not going to know till Saturday when they go to scrimmage and we see people start playing football, and of course we will not have a vantage point for the scrimmage other than what we're told by the staff, and we will come back here Saturday night and try to decipher all that for you, and then again on Sunday. But listen, I don't want it to sound bad, but I thought it was a great day for the defense in team periods. I did not get a chance to see 7-on-7, Bob. I thought both quarterbacks had rough days in team. What did you see in 7-on-7, and what was your evaluation of them over the course of the day?
Yeah, I didn't think this was a really good day for Brock. I thought he's had much better, much sharper, more decisive days. This definitely wasn't it. I saw Tony Tokar's get on him really, really good after a couple of just not necessarily gimme throws, but just misses that you can see the staff is pushing Brock as if he were going to be the starter. There were some good moments for the offense, like Cam Davis clearly had his best day. I think we talked about that too on First Impressions.
We did.
Cam, this was a day where really you saw not just that physicality, but the speed, that kind of breakaway speed on one of those runs. It was pretty. And hey, I keep talking about, I don't know how they're going to make all these running backs happy, but it's a good problem to have. Another guy we haven't talked a ton about, Jackson West, but he had a really nice diving grab outside. He's just, again, I think we know Kyle Morlock is going to be the number one tight end. I think everybody knew that going in. We all feel like that's going to be the way it is on August 24th.
Yep.
I don't think we have a real feel for who is 2, 3, 4 and on down in the tight end room. So could Jackson West be that type of guy? I think we've seen an improved blocker. We've seen a pretty decent pass catching tight end there. So that's a guy that's been impressive. We talk about LaWayne McCoy, I think off and on over this last 7-8 days. LaWayne for a freshman looks really, really good. Definitely not saying he's going to grab 25 passes this fall, but it looks good. He belongs. He definitely has good footwork, good hands. Didn't see as many drops from him compared to, honestly, a lot of the veterans had a lot of drops today. I think that's what was really, really concerning, is the names that you think are dependable, they weren't so dependable today. But I thought LaWayne had a good day. Malik Benson, that one-handed grab was pretty incredible. So again, like you said, in the micro sense, we tend to overanalyze or really dive in from a written and video portion, but there were some positives, I thought, on offense.
Oh yeah. I think you got to be careful not to go. And this is just a general rule for everybody. I think you got to be careful not to read too much into any one practice. I mean, it's just the nature of the beast. But to go back to your point about Kyle Morlock, he's gotten to the point where he's a good enough rocker that I don't know who it was, and got a little chippy after Kyle got him to the ground about 6 or 7 yards away from the end of the line of scrimmage. So you do see that, and I don't know if that's something we would have seen from Kyle last year, but he is certainly sticking his nose in there and trying to get after it. And we heard Mike talk about Brian Courtney. Now, I think he's going to be more used as a pass catcher, as a tight end. But listen, you could still line up in 12 personnel with 2 tight ends and, put Brian to the backside of where the play is going and have him make cutoff blocks. We've also obviously he's going to get better at it. And listen, we've seen Mike coach around some deficiencies, particularly his first 2 years across the front as a whole in the offensive line and tight end. So, but yeah, it was. There were guys that stood out. Listen, Jalen Lucas continues to be impressive. I'm always going to try to find a way to work here in once a day here on these shows. But Keziah had a nice run inside. Roydell Williams had a nice run on inside. So we're just trying to give you what we saw today. We're not trying to muddy the waters. Jerry, I know you were getting ready to say something.
I was just going to add that I thought Dancy also had a good day today.
Yeah, he does, and he continues to flash. I don't know if that was a guy coming into camp we were expected to catch our eye as much as he had.
He's very, very fast, and he has good hands.
Yeah, he's. I think he's going to be similar to as we've said the other day, similar to Lawrence Toafili as far as his skill set, where he's going to be able to catch ball out of the backfield. He does get the full speed, really, really fast. We've seen Lawrence used on hand sweeps and quick pitches and those types of things over the course of his career, screens, in addition to just the regular running game. And I think we'll see Micaiah used the same way. And listen, as Bob said, a lot of talent to get the ball to. Are you better off? They're going to use whoever they have to use to win, right? I mean, that's the name of the game. But it will be interesting to see, if Roydell and Lawrence and Jalen can carry the most of the load. Do you save a year with Micaiah? I mean, we're going to start getting into those questions as we start getting closer to the season. Looking forward to the season and the schedule. I don't know. And we're going to talk about this a little bit after the break. We're going to start taking a look at talking about some of Florida State's opponents. Last year we knew there was going to be ample opportunity based on the schedule. We thought there would be ample opportunity going into the season to get some late playing time for some of your backup players, just because Florida State was such a dominant football team last year. And it was really kind of, in my opinion, an average year in the ACC, and where you felt like Florida State was going to have some time to put the game away going into the late third quarter, early fourth. You bring these kids in. Just starting to look at the schedule, I'm not sure as many opportunities will exist this year. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. But, I think that's part of the question at running back, right?
Yeah, I would say it's a sneaky tough schedule. Let's remember that there's not going to be as many blowout type games. I think, honestly, we have to factor in this too. Like, Roydell had more than 100 touches at Alabama last year.
Yep.
Jalen had more than 100 touches at Indiana. I think LT had just under between 90 and 100 touches, again, rushing, receiving. That's a lot of experienced veteran guys who you feel like you can just plug in and go. But then it's, what does Keziah give you? It's how to use Micaiah. Is Micaiah a return type? Like David Johnson has mentioned Micaiah Danzy as a returner. So that's one option, Malik Benson being a returner. You can stash a running back who you maybe thought might be a redshirt option like Micaiah as a returner, but then you burn the red shirt. So you can either play him up to 4, or it's going to be a full season out of him. So these are interesting discussions. But again, if David Johnson's calling him the surprise to him, maybe of his room or the offense, you start getting a glimpse of, hey, the coaches are reevaluating how you're going to use that true freshman.
Yeah, I think we all thought. I think we all assumed, hey, it's Cam was one of the most highly recruited players in all of America. I think we all thought if there was a freshman running back play, it was going to be him. And listen, it still may be. We saw flashes of his talent today, but it is. Listen, it's you could make an argument that Florida State will be better at running back this year in the totality of the room than it was last year, and that is losing. A second-round pick, a third-round pick, and trade. I can't remember when he was drafted, but you got an NFL player that you're replacing, and you might be better at running back as a whole, the entire room, than you were last year. And you're starting. And listen, Mike has done a fabulous job over his career. If you go back to Memphis, where he had those two, Antonio Gibson and the other guy's name escapes me. Both of them are starting in the NFL now. They were in the same backfield, and both managed to be high round picks, first or second round picks in the NFL draft. And he managed to keep those guys happy. So this is something that he's done before. And listen, Mike is always, we saw it last year. I mentioned this in one of our earlier shows, and it's going to drive me crazy. I can't remember his name, but CJ Campbell. We would see out of nowhere, you'd see CJ Campbell in the ball game in the second quarter for 2 snaps. So he does do a good job of that. As Kelly said, fresh legs, and Marvin agrees with us. He thinks Marvin agrees with us. He thinks the running back room is better as a whole. And listen, I think that's the one room on offense you look at and say we might be better. And that's hard to say coming off last year's team. But yeah, I had not realized that David Johnson had said that. That's high praise coming out of that room.
Yeah, Kelly Lowry just made a very good point there about Mike doing a good job of multiple sets. And, you can prepare a Dancy in a set to where, a set that emphasizes his natural skills, things he's doing good in an early point in his career, and get him reps. And keep your other guys fresh for the fourth quarter. So I think there's ways to force it. And I'm a big believer in you coach next year's team this year. So if they can get Dancy some early reps this year, and in another set, Cam Davis gets some early reps, they really get a test of where they're at and what they have to develop, and not be over there on the sideline thinking they're, smelling of themselves, thinking that they're ready-made for college. So, I think it's a blessing to have that many talented guys. And I'll say one other thing real quick here is, you got speed, and it surprises me when you see Cam break the line of scrimmage and he's housing it. I mean, he can run. I mean, the guy's as thick as he is, he can scoot. And of course, we know Keziah can, Toafili can, Dancy can. So there's there's home run potential in that backfield.
Yeah, and listen, one thing we do know about Mike's offense is he's going to try to go after some chunk plays, right? And this very, very well might be Bob. You have to remind me. It was either 2 seasons ago or 3 seasons ago. It was a big chunk play offense. I think, and I can't remember whether it was 2022 or 2021, but there was one of those offenses in particular. The personality of it was it relied on the big play, and I believe I'm going back to 2021. And I mean, 2021. I believe I'm right in that. We started talking about, well, it's just a big play offense, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, the little plays are setting up the big plays. But yeah, so I think it's going to be fascinating to see. And of course, listen, this used to be how Florida State's rosters were stocked all the time. The bad news is now I don't want to bring it up because we still got 6 months before we have to worry about it. I got this thing called the portal now, and we're going to talk a little bit about the portal later as to how it might have impacted a couple of Florida State's early opponents. But that's something you didn't have to worry about. But I remember when you had Tiger McMillan and Marquette Smith and golly, it was work done. Part of that backfield at the time, he might have been a freshman by the time Tiger and Marquette, but there used to be a time where we were 3 and 4 deep with as many high school All-American running backs as you could find. Felix Harris, I mean, used to be a embarrassment of wealth in the FSU backfield, and it looks like we might have that now. And Seminole win has confirmed that I am right. It was 2021, the chunk offense, as I used to call it. And, of course, there's nothing wrong with it as long as it produces points. But, yeah, so I think it's going to be interesting to see. And, listen, I still think, as we've talked about, we'll talk about it more, it will be interesting to see how this receiver core develops and impacts this offense. And listen, it's a tight end. Listen, Kelly, what we've seen from Kyle Morlock so far, it looks like he is going to be able to be an impact player for Florida State in the passing game, in the middle of the field. He's certainly caught a ton of passes and over the middle of the field already in camp. And we talked about it. He does seem to be a guy that DJU and Brock both know where he is almost at all times. He is, he kind of reminds me of the chemistry. And I shouldn't say this, but there was he kind of reminds me of the go-to guys like Jason Witten was for Tony Romo. Romo always knew where Jason Witten was. And I am not comparing Kyle Morlock to Jason Witten, just to be clear. I'm just trying to give everyone a comp of the compatibility of the quarterback and tight end. And you see it in a lot of offenses. But, listen, Kyle certainly, as we've talked about it, I think he's going to get his catches from last year and Jaheim's catches from last year. And then you've got to hope that particularly – and listen, Kelly, we do think if you saw Amari Williams, he might be a guy that can come in and line up at tight end in passing situations. I know he's early in freshman. He moved to the 2024 class. He could be a member of the 2025 class. And he's a guy that continues to impress just about every practice, particularly as a receiver. I think he will probably have to take some time and continue to develop as a blocker. He's got to get stronger, as we can all imagine. But, yeah, I think and then, of course, Jackson West. Jackson seems to be one of their stronger blockers, but people have to remember Jackson was more of a wide receiver coming out of high school than he was a tight end. He lined up in the slot a lot in high school, lined up as the number one receiver a lot. If you go back and watch his high school tape, he was an extremely talented pass catcher, and he just happens to be the biggest tight end they have in the room right now. Which, you kind of default the guy you want in there when you have to block. And, of course, I think, as we've said before, I think the thing we all remember about Jackson from last year was that block against Florida that sprung Trey Benson for a long run. But he was an excellent receiver coming out of high school. And then, of course, Brian Courtney was just a heck of an athlete coming out of high school, played a little bit of everything for his high school quarterback, linebacker. I mean, he was all over the place. And he's just a smaller guy. So we'll see how – and you're right, you have to scheme around it, with it, however you want to put that. So it's going to be interesting. And, of course, listen, we've been waiting a long time to see him, guys. And, we've heard about his potential, and we've said many, many times that if Darrell Jackson does not want to be blocked, he cannot be blocked. And he wasn't today. I can tell you that. And when you start seeing he and Farmer come around, it is going to be, I think it's going to be fun to watch those two interior tackles. And it might be, I think, now it's hard to say this because Braden Fisk was a hell of a player and maybe even a better leader than he was a player. But I think that's another spot, depending on how KJ Sampson and Daniel Lyons and Grady Kelly come along the next 23 days before they go to Dublin. I think that the defensive tackle, and I'm not talking about ends, I'm just talking about tackles, those inside two tackles, I think Florida State has a chance to be better this year there than they were last year. Do you guys agree or disagree?
Yes, 100%.
I mean,
yeah.
And Tommy Jaya, he's not bad either.
Yeah, listen, I am so happy they went ahead and slid him inside. I remember sitting and waiting, watching him come in for his official visit. I don't remember who was out there. It might have just been me and Matt from On 3, and it might have been the whole gang. But I remember saying, that guy's not an end. That guy's going to grow into a defensive tackle. And I think with some of the attrition, and then obviously with bringing Marvin in and Sione in, you had the option of moving one of those guys inside, and obviously Durajay's got the build, and he is going to be a guy that's 300 pounds by the time he's through with college. And I had him a number of times. He won at least one of his pro. Listen, they only took about 2 reps in practice on pass pro, at least individual. I had him down for a win. I had him down for a tackle for loss and inside. So he is starting to show up. And people have to remember this is the first time he's played inside. And I don't know. Listen, it is different technically, other than staying low and leverage and inside hands. Some of the techniques you use as a defensive tackle are different than the techniques you use as a defensive end. And then, has he ever played the style? And it's really not two-gapping, but it is two-gapping. Has he ever done that? I don't know. I don't know what West Virginia did last year on defense, but you certainly have to be impressed with how he's come along as well. And then, of course, I think you can tell Josh Farmer's fired up for this year. He looked really good in practice today as well. I think the defensive ends have a chance to be good. It's just hard to believe that you're going to be as good as you were last year with Jared Verse.
Yeah. On the first team, that's a great point. But I think the second team defensive ends are going to be better. I think Byron Turner has developed. He's bigger, thicker. He's more obvious during practice. And then Sione is a good-looking kid too. I think the second team defensive ends are much better than they were last year.
I think when you put Sione, and if you're talking about Marvin and Sione specifically, I agree with you. Now we have seen Byron Turner get a lot of reps in this camp. He's still a smallish guy to me at defensive end. But listen, he's made some plays. I noticed him a couple times today. I believe he had a sack in one of the team periods, if my notes are accurate, and I've got him right in front of me. I did have him down for a sack at some point in practice. So, and he's a guy that looks like he's gotten better against the run, at least from what I've seen in half line inside. And Kelly, we're going to come back in a few minutes and talk a little bit about Georgia Tech and why your friends may be talking smack to you. It may be because of their backfield, Haynes King and Jamal Haynes, who are very good. But we'll talk a little bit about Georgia Tech here as we talk about our summer scouting notes. But guys, FSU will be back at it tomorrow, back on the practice field for another practice before Saturday's first scrimmage. We'll be back out at practice. It'll be at 9:00 in the morning. We'll have interviews again for Mike and whatever coaches or players are available after practice in addition to Mike. And then, of course, we'll have first impressions. Then, unfortunately, Saturday, you have a better chance. If you're watching or listening to us, you have a better chance of seeing the scrimmage than we do. So hopefully you'll let us know what happens. Other than that, we will have some coverage of post-scrimmage coverage, Bob, at 9:30. Mike's going online, Zooming with the coordinators and the media as well. So we will have some instant reaction from the staff on Saturday night. If you're up late, if you've been out partying and going down to the disco, you can come back from the disco and listen to us talk about what Mike had to say. But it'll be practice number 7 is under bridge under the water under the bridge. Is that water under the bridge? Is that bridge under the water? And we are 23 days out from the start of FSU's kickoff against Georgia Tech in Dublin. And we're going to be back in about 81 seconds after we hear from a couple of our sponsors. And we're going to talk very briefly because it is football season, and Jerry and Bob gave me the wherewithal to go ahead and start doing some early scouting reports. And we just want to talk a little bit about FSU's first 3 opponents, some additions to their roster, why people are buzzing about the Yellow Jackets, and why Memphis may be tough to tame for a lot of teams on their schedule. Maybe not particularly Florida State, but it is a sneaky hard schedule, as Bob said. So we'll be right back in 81 seconds.
At Aviva Stadium in Dublin, the home of the
Seminole Seminole fans, Alumni Hall is your ultimate FSU shopping experience and has moved to a new location off Timberlane Road in Tallahassee. Shop FSU gear from Nike, Champion, New Era, Yeti, and more. Alumni Hall has Seminole gear for the entire family, plus accessories and gifts. Spend $150 and you'll earn $10 off your next purchase with their Hall Pass rewards. Stop by their new location on Timberlane Road near REI or shop anytime online at alumnihall.com. Alumni Hall, where Seminole fans shop. Finding an experienced lawyer you can trust is crucial. With over 50 years of combined litigation experience, the attorneys at Mowry Law Firm are dedicated to providing our clients with exceptional legal services, focusing on car and trucking accidents, premises liability, and wrongful death. Call 904-824-7799, MowryLaw.com.
All right, we are back. Can you guys hear me?
We're here.
Okay, I had a little bit of an audio difficulty while we were going to commercial. I'm not sure exactly what happened. All right, Kelly. So we did a little bit of early scouting on some of Florida State's opponents, and we don't want to dig into it too much, but there is a lot of buzz around an improved Georgia Tech team under what will now be third-year head coach Brent Key. And listen, I think I will say this. I've already seen the line go down on this game. It started out as 13.5 points. It's down to 13. Then I saw one this morning. It was 12.5. Who the hell knows what's going on? It could be to get more money thrown at one team or the other. It could be because of what people that Vegas puts out on the streets are seeing at practice. I can assure you somebody knows something from somewhere. But anyway, Brent Key is 11-10 in 2+ seasons at Georgia Tech. That's 2 seasons and a bowl game. Listen, they do look much different than they did against under Jeff Collins. That seemed to age poorly under Jeff Collins. That program did. And, listen, one of the reasons they're optimistic, Bob, is they've got a really good quarterback and a really good run game, and they returned most of their offensive line from last year. They've brought some transfers in. As you have the unfortunate duty of reading my scouting reports. So when I send you these things, I'm sure you have a preconceived idea of what you think a team may or may not be coming into a season. So when you started looking, and they brought in Tyler Santucci, who was at Duke last year, as Mike Elko's defensive coordinator. He is the new defensive coordinator at Georgia Tech. They're going to go to a 4-2-5 defense, similar to what Florida State runs. What was your takeaway when you kind of read the scouting report and said, oh, well, maybe they're this, maybe they're not as good as I thought, or maybe they're better than I thought? What was your instant reaction?
Instant reaction for sure was that's a lot of returning talent on offense. That's a lot of transfer portal, infusion of talent they've brought in. I know people talked about Georgia Tech's schedule as being tough, but just from the standpoint of Florida State versus Georgia Tech and a 13-ish point spread, this feels like one that I wouldn't want to take Florida State to cover that. There's a lot of confidence around Georgia Tech, and obviously what you've written between Haynes King and an experienced program. But talking with one of the Georgia Tech writers, Kelly Quinlan up in Charlotte, because Georgia Tech was talking the same day as Florida State. Kelly's really high on this team because he's covered Georgia Tech for 20 plus years. He's seen the good, the bad. He can compare this team to prior teams. He really feels like Brent Key is kind of hitting that stride now. Obviously, he had the interim tag. Then he's been able to take over in full. Haynes King being an experienced quarterback, learning under Chris Wenke. And Haynes even told me the reason why he was in Atlanta is because of Chris Wenke, that Tennessee had recruited him back when Chris was up there. So a lot of relationships there, a lot of good relationships. And this is part of that sneaky, tough schedule. We don't think of Georgia Tech as being a good program because they've been down, right?
Yep.
But we feel like, and I've heard a couple of people, maybe even ESPN's David Hale, who said this might be the best Georgia Tech team in the last 5 or so type of years. So down under Jeff Collins, on the way up with this roster at the moment. We'll see if they can recruit to a level, but on the way up, looking into 2024.
Yeah, Athlons has them ranked ninth, preseason ninth in the ACC, as does Lindy's, 47th and 42nd nationally in those two publications, minus 13. The over-under is already going down 3.5 points, if I'm right, based off what I've seen, because I did take this from ESPN Bets, and that's what I saw this morning. But yeah, listen, they brought in we got to get a scouting report on one of their new starting guards from Rick Stockstill. He played for Rick last year at Middle Tennessee, Keelan Rutledge, and they brought in some defensive help, most notably E.J. Lightsey from Georgia, and then probably the guy that probably brings in the most experience is Romello Height from USC. He was 13 tackles, recorded 14 pressures. He did in 277 snaps, so it was pretty good. And then, of course, they brought in their version of Jared Verse. They brought in a kid named Jack Barton, who was an all conference performer at Furman. So we'll see if how those guys impact the defense. But it's certainly, based on what they had to say in the press conference, Bob, I did go back and listen to Brent talk and both players, Jamal Haynes and Haynes King. And remember, Haynes King, if you don't, was signed with Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M, and he was supposed to be the guy that was going to save Jimbo and or help Jimbo get Texas A&M over the hump. And listen, if he wanted to play for Winky, he likes hard coaching, because I'm going to tell you what, Winky is a hard ass on those guys. Now he's old school guy. So, but anyway, I think that's going to be an interesting game. Listen, I think this, when I started doing the scouting report, Bob, I was like, all right, hey, this isn't the Georgia Tech teams we've seen come down here in the past. And listen, after I did my scouting report, I said, well, Georgia Tech's a team that's better than I thought they were. So we'll have more on Georgia Tech. We'll do a more thorough scouting report as we get during the week of the game. We'll go back and look at where their hit charts from last year, particularly on offense, where they like to run the ball, where they like to throw the ball. And of course, we'll have as much information on defense because it's a new system. And but we obviously will be familiar with what Tyler Sanducci does after his success at Duke with Mike Elko. Early this week, we did a combo Boston College, Memphis summer scouting notes report. Obviously, probably the thing we're paying attention to there with Boston College, which is a Monday night game at Florida State. It's Bill O'Brien's back in college football, the former Houston, Texas, and Penn State head coach, and he coached for at Georgia Tech for a while with George O'Leary, and that's kind of where his he's from the George O'Leary tree. I think the big thing there, Bob, I don't think they're expected to be a great team this year. 4.5 wins, but they weren't a great team last year, and they pushed Florida State to the brink. Listen, Florida State, if that ball had gone inbounds and off Keon Coleman's leg on that punt return, we're probably not talking about a 13-0 team. We're talking about a 12-1 team because that ball going out of bounds saved the day because Boston College is riding some momentum. But listen, I think anytime you got a quarterback like Thomas Castellanos and a running back like Kai Robichaud, and then you come up with an offense. Listen, you can say what you want about Bill O'Brien. He's rough around the edges. I've been around Bill a little bit back when I was inside college football. He's a tough, hard-nosed guy, and he did a great job under some very difficult – now, college football's changed a lot since he was at Penn State back, those many years ago. But he was 15-9 at 2 seasons under some severe NCAA sanctions and some roster issues where players fled that program. One had 2 – I don't know if he had both of them were winning seasons. But anyway, 15-9 over 2 seasons. Not much of it expected, but Bob, Florida State's a 22-point favorite going into that game. I don't think this is a game where I just think Florida State will probably take care of business. But what I was kind of like, this is a draw. The same Boston College team. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I fear Thomas Castellanos because of what we saw last year. I also think you bring in Trayshawn Ward.
Yeah.
That makes your capabilities of running the ball, your depth in the backfield is even better. They've got Kamari Morales, the North Carolina transfer tight end from Tallahassee Lincoln. So it feels like Boston College sort of stocked up there under Halfley, even though Halfley bailed to go to the Green Bay Packers. I have no idea what to expect. First-year head coach jumping in that late in the cycle. Tough job to come in there, hold some semblance of a spring practice, and then jump out there. But look, we all hold Bill O'Brien to maybe higher regard as an NFL head coach, or an NFL coordinator than what he's done at the college level. But if he can resonate with yet another quarterback, if he can improve Thomas just a little bit as a passer, Boston College could be a pretty dangerous team, I think, in 25 and beyond.
Yeah, it's probably the only thing that worries you is you face them early, right? A lot of things you have not seen before. I don't know who Boston College plays before Florida State, but listen, obviously he's a good play caller. He would not have lasted in the NFL as long as he did. He's a head coach, play caller. Was a play caller for Nick Saban for at least 1 year, maybe two. But they did have some interesting transfer pickups. Ryan Turner, who was the 183rd best prospect in the portal this offseason, a cornerback from Ohio State. They added him along with Trayshawn Ward. They bring in a receiver, Jerron Bradley from Texas Tech, who had over 1,100 yards over 2 seasons in Lubbock. As you mentioned, this is what COVID and these. All right, so when I moved back to Tallahassee in 2013 and started working for Fox Sports and Scout.com, Kamari Morales was a freshman at Lincoln. I'm not going to say I put him on the map. I was just the first person to talk about him. He is still playing. My point is, he's still playing college football, and I met this kid in 2013. So this is crazy. But anyway, it'll be interesting to see what Bill O'Brien does with this team, which is not expected to do very much. FSU's third game, and this is going to be our last topic for today. Memphis. Orion Silverfield is the head coach. He is 31-19 in 4+ seasons. The plus is the Cotton Bowl, which he took over for Mike Norvell, and I think they played Wisconsin, Bob. I could be wrong. I can't remember. But anyway, he coached that Cotton Bowl team for Mike after Mike came to Florida State. He went 13-12 in 2022 and 2021 and 2022. He went into last year under some pressure, finished the season 10-3, fourth in the AAC. And then this year, they are predicted the first in the ACC by both AAC. Too many A's, too many C's right now. You got they're nationally 37th by Athlons, 36th by Lindy's. Picked first across the board, 9.5 wins under over for them. The good news is these are two coaches that know each other very, very well. We're probably not – I don't think Mike's going to surprise Ryan. I don't think Ryan's going to surprise Mike. They spend a lot of time in the same staff room. Ryan was the offensive line coach for Mike at Memphis. But he, at least offensively, brings back a stock team. Seth Hannigan as their quarterback, threw for 3,380 yards and 30 touchdowns last year while completing 67% of the passes. Then they have all 3 returning receivers back, and then they have a 4th one in their tight end. That group, those 4 players, hauled in 184 passes for 2,500, almost 2,600 yards. They do have to replace some offensive linemen. They've gone to the portal to do that, much like Florida State has done in the past. But probably the biggest addition to me was Mario Henderson, the guy that played 1 year at South Carolina but was an All-American at Newberry College. All-American in that he was a finalist for the Harlan Hill Award in 2022. And for you guys that are not familiar with FCS football, Harlan Hill Award is the same thing as the Heisman for that level. So, Bob, what were your thoughts when you read that read about the Tigers?
I think it's interesting to reflect a little bit about Silverfield because he was the assistant coach that we all heard Mike Norvell needs to bring that guy down to Tallahassee when he was hired. And a couple of high school coaches down here even said, we know about Silverfield because I think he was the Jacksonville recruiter for Memphis.
He was. He's from Jacksonville.
Right. So that was a guy that I think Norvell would have liked to have brought down, but of course, happy to see Ryan get the job at Memphis. And Silverfield was very much on the hot seat going into 23, gets off of it in a hurry. I think he's got it rolling for a lot of reasons. Returning talent, FedEx money helps, guys. $25 million in NIL over 5 years from FedEx puts you in the position to be the best G5 on the planet easily. So they're going to be able to retain talent. I'd be very curious to talk to some of the Memphis beat writers as we get a little bit closer. Was NIL critical for keeping, like you said, Hennigan, the 3 receivers, bringing in portal talent? Because that changes your ball game. Instead of being rated, you are a buyer. And that's the type of thing that kind of changes the outlook of your program. I don't think Mike Norvell is going to love that this game is on the schedule now as much as he liked it when he scheduled it a couple of years ago. Is that fair?
I think that's very fair. I'm sitting here looking at the transfer list. You bring in Tennessee's leading tackler from a year ago. Listen, that FedEx money brought some pretty things to Memphis now. And it may bring a new conference affiliation at some point if they keep on winning the way they are, because obviously they'd be a good fit for the Big 12 or the ACC, depending on how all that stuff plays out over the coming years. But listen, they brought in Elijah Herring from Tennessee. He had 76 tackles last year, started 11 ball games. 6'3", 230-pound guy. He's going to line up in the middle of their defense next to their leading tackler from a year ago, an outside linebacker. Then they brought in a really good player from Arkansas State, Javante Mackey. He's from the Memphis area, but he had 84 tackles a year ago. Then they brought in Reggie Grimes from Oklahoma, who missed all of last year except for 4 games due to injury. But in 2022, Florida State played against Grimes. He was their team's leader in sacks, played in 37 games for Oklahoma dating back to 2020. But I believe they brought in 16 defensive players total. They brought in almost 30 transfers into this Memphis program. When I did my scouting report, I thought they were better on offense than I thought that they would be when I started doing my research, particularly when I looked at the running back being brought in from South Carolina and the success he had at Newberry, which listen, Newberry's not Florida State. I'm not saying that, but he was a dominant player at that level, as was Jared Verse when he was an FCS player. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be a first-round pick, but you're certainly impressed with what you read about on offense. Listen, their defense was awful last year. They played in the 59-50 game. There were a lot of 45-38 type things. I think they were 114th or 110th in defense nationally last year. So obviously Silverfield went in and really said, hey, if I'm going to make a run at this thing, make a run at a playoff berth, being the best, highest rated group of 5 champion, I've got to improve my defense. He certainly looks like he's done that. It'll be interesting to see how they match up with Florida State. And listen, obviously, Ryan and Mike still have a good relationship. He's been here the last 2 summers attending camp, and I think they were here for the mega camp, but he's been here for several camps. He was here at least one time this summer, one time last summer. But anyway, just want to start talking a little bit of football because we are 7 days into talking about nothing but Seminoles. Not that there's anything wrong with that. We love to do it, but we are just 23 days out from Georgia Tech, and I love going back in and seeing who these guys have added. The portal makes off-season research so much more fun because it does give you an idea, is this team better? Did it get better through the portal? Did it get worse? And listen, I think it's going to be a very interesting start to the season with Georgia Tech and Memphis. BC does not concern me very much, to be honest with you, Bob. And I said the same thing last year, ended up regretting it as I sat up in the press box and at BC thinking, oh shit, we're fixing to talk about a loss. But anyway, Georgia Tech looks like it's a better team than I thought it was going to be coming into this season based off research. I'll say the same thing for Memphis, but it'll be a fun year. And we will have actually, we'd be interested to get your comments on who you would like to see the next summer scouting report to be from. We're probably going to do one on Cal and SMU simply because they're new to the league and most people don't know a ton about them. We're probably going to stay away from the back end of the schedule for now, unless we get some people that want us to write about it. We'll know more about Florida and those kind of teams and Miami as we get closer to those games. And I don't feel like there's as much need to do a scouting report all the way through the schedule, but we will certainly do it if you would like to see them. But I love doing them. They're fun. Gets me fired up for football. We hope you enjoy them. All right, Bob. Well, we appreciate you joining us always. Appreciate Jerry being on here. If you want to go back for all our coverage of practice, from photo galleries to video galleries to our features, our conversation with Mike, we had Lawrence Tofili today, Bob. Lawrence was there?
We had Mekhi Danzy,
Mekhi
who's been,
Danzy.
the freshman star, and then Earl Little Jr. So 2 good interviews. Yep.
Yeah, so we'll have what we have some more from what they said. Of course, it's easy to get LT and Micaiah confused. I call them twins, so that's why. All right, but we'll be back tomorrow. Oh no, we will not be back tomorrow. Tomorrow's Friday. We will be back tomorrow with a first impressions tape video. Instant reaction for tomorrow's practice. And then we'll be back Monday to kind of talk about what the coaches said about the scrimmage on Saturday night. We will have obviously written coverage on the scrimmage on Saturday night and Sunday. We'll have some recruiting news coming out, of course, as several players are getting ready to commit. Obviously, the guy that everybody's talking about now are LaDarian Clarity, who we thought was going to commit to Ole Miss on the 3rd. Now it looks like Florida State's kind of creeping back in that picture a little bit, and he's pushed his commitment date back. So we'll see how that plays out, but we'll have Fish back on next week. But please go to theosceola.com and check us out, or floridastate.rivals.com. It will take you to the same place, but we've got a tremendous amount of football and recruiting coverage, even a little lacrosse coverage. And we've got some information on the stadium. We got some video from the stadium, the renovations that are going on now. And it's we'll think you'll be either impressed or depressed by what you see when you look at it. But a lot of work going on over there, and it's going to be interesting to see what that stadium sounds like and feels like when Boston College comes to town on for that Monday night game, which will be cool. At least it's a night game. But yeah, so and if you don't subscribe to the Osceola YouTube page, please hit the subscribe button, then hit the notification button so that when we do these live shows, you get alerted, or even you get alerts for tape shows. But thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time on Seminole Sidelines.